Welcome, everybody. Episode 3, the Patriot Source Podcast. This is going to be an absolute bombshell of a recording, a doozy. I'm excited about this one, but before we jump into it, everybody make sure that you subscribe to the channel. We are on YouTube, as you know, at Patriot Source Podcast. Still working on the stinking Rumble channel. I haven't been able to figure that one out, but honestly, I haven't spent that much time on it. Mostly because I have been diving deeply and along with you guys into this topic because we're going to spend the next hour absolutely crushing one of the biggest, most disgusting, heinous lies that are running rampant across the internet right now. We've talked a lot about the Epstein hoax. We've talked about the funding mechanism to the color revolution. And the thing that these people will not let go of, we are going to obliterate today. That is the Katie Johnson, Jane Doe hoax. And it is an absolute hoax. And we've got all of it. We've got the news articles. We've got the court cases. We know who was behind it. We know the people that were funding it. We know all of it. And we are going to absolutely crush it today. And I hope we have enough time in an hour and 10 minutes to get through it all. And there's probably going to be a lot of stuff that we leave on the table. But this has to be done because I don't know about you guys, Nom, SK, but I am sick and tired of watching people pretend like this story wasn't completely destroyed 9 years ago.
Well, it's extinction burst behavior is what you're watching happen, right? You're watching a bunch of people who every single week are told this is going to be the what takes Trump down. This is the thing. We finally got him. It's like that meme where that old dude fishing is like, oh, we almost got him now. Except every single time it fails, they get even more and more desperate. So oh my goodness, there's this lady named Katie Johnson who accused President Trump of, all the things. Let's go deep in that. It's extinction burst. They're shaking the vending machine and they're not getting what they want out of the vending machine. So they're just going to get more and more aggressive. That's all this is.
And what do you mean extinction burst?
I'm actually
I've heard that.
I'm embarrassed for them, actually.
It's pretty bad. What do you mean by extinction burst? Can you describe that? Because I think that's an absolutely relevant analogy to what you're seeing happen right now.
Yeah, I mean, extinction burst is, very simply put, it's whenever you do something and you expect a result, right? You get that kind of that dopamine hit, that whatever, every time that you do something, and then the result that like cancel culture, right? So you look at cancel culture where the left could say that person did something racist, and then you were actually successful at canceling somebody. Well, when we just stop caring that they're trying to cancel us or any of that stuff, and that they don't get the reaction that they expected, that they were used to, that created that dopamine hit for them, then they start to rage because they need that reaction. They're not getting it. So Bongino used to describe it all the time. Like, you put your money in the vending machine and then you expect your candy bar to come out. And when your candy bar doesn't come out, you start shaking and kicking and punching the machine because you're not getting what you expect. That's basically extinction burst behavior. And that's what we're watching.
Wow. SK, happy Sunday. Are you excited about this?
I am very excited about this. I've been debunking this for the last year and a half. And I even found some information today that I wasn't aware of. So I'm excited to share all that.
Why is this story still alive today? Like, what is wrong with these people on Blue Talk that they don't know that the Katie Johnson hoax was debunked 9 years ago? And every time that story pops back up again, it continues to be debunked again. Why don't they know that?
I don't think that they pay as close of attention to these things. It's very easy to tell that the Epstein stuff wasn't something that was important to them prior to it becoming a political talking point. I also think you have a lot of younger people that, weren't even old enough to vote in 2016. And as soon as they hear something negative about Trump, they don't investigate, they don't do anything. They just run with the narrative. And that's the narrative that's pushed. And that's what they go with, just like the declaring war on Chicago. That's, immediately you could tell when they got their talking point, and it just got handed down and spread around. And then it went to elected officials and everything. It's just, it's the same type of thing. And that's one thing that bothers me the most about this Epstein stuff, is that people need to understand that we voted for Donald Trump, and we voted for Donald Trump because we knew there was zero evidence that he committed any crimes against any kids. Nobody's protecting anybody. We know it doesn't exist because we've investigated this and followed it for over a decade.
That's right. Investigated it deeply. Probably more. I think the three people on this panel have probably spent more time looking at this particular case than anybody else in the country. At least pulling all the different media pieces about it, all of the statements about it, all of the articles that were written about it together over the last, I know I've been talking about it for a year and a half. SK, I know you've been talking about it for just as long. Heck, I think you even read some of these documents in one of your lives on TikTok, if I'm not mistaken, or you've read some of this stuff.
And I think it was like last summer, about the time that you and I started kind of working together on some things and investigating a couple of things together to see what we could find about this, as well as, you know, the Mark Elias Project 2025, People's Guide to Project 2025. It was around that time, I think. And I read court documents from the hush money case. I read the court transcripts from that case, as well as Hunter Biden's case in Delaware. And I mean, I've read a lot of these documents online, but I didn't know that they filed an amended complaint in this case.
Yeah, we'll get into that because we're going to walk through all of the details of this case from start to finish, and just to make sure that we are trying to stay as close to on time as possible, because I think we could probably talk about this for about 3 hours. But we're going to jump in. I want to start us with something that I noticed a couple of days ago when the Epstein hoax started to be completely and totally obliterated, thanks to the fact that the victims who came out and wanted to speak earlier in the week at their press conference ended up walking into a situation where the same people who had victimized them years ago are victimizing them again. And they had their voices taken from them, and it was allowed to turn into a media circus, an absolute shit show of a media circus. And all those women wanted to do was be heard. And from that moment on, we started to see nothing but a bunch of lies and propaganda spread across social media. And I came across this video, and I think this is just one of many that I want to share with you guys, just so you can get a sense of the type of color revolutionary lies and propaganda that are starting to make their way across social media. And we're going to deal with this from start to finish. So what I'm getting ready to show you is a TikTok video from somebody on that platform who, for whatever reason, thinks it's perfectly okay just to lie to you.
CV-00797-DMG-K6, document 1, filed April 26, 2016. There are 6 pages. This is the clerk stamp. This is Katie Johnson, address redacted, United States District Court, Central District of California. Katie Johnson versus Donald Jessica Trump and Jeffrey E. Epstein. They are the defendants. This is case number EDCV 16-00797-DMG-KSX. To be supplied by the clerk of the United States District Court. This is a complaint for claim relief due to S abuse under the threat of harm, conspiracy to deprive civil rights.
So Ruth Cassidy, who has a pretty small account over on TikTok, decided that she wanted to spend her week reading these court documents to her entire audience. And now she does have a very small audience. There's no doubt about that. It's tiny, but nonetheless, almost as if this document had for the first time been released just this week. And now I tried to engage with Ruth Cassidy over on TikTok a little bit, and she called me a bot. Like, that was her response. She's like, "You're just a bot."
200,000 follower bot account. Yes.
I have like over 220,000 followers on that platform, and she called me a bot. So I actually gave her an opportunity to acknowledge the fact that she was lying to her audience by reading this document. And of course, she didn't want to take that opportunity. So I was nice enough to let her know that we will be using her video in this podcast just to highlight the absolute insanity that we're seeing playing across Blue Talk and across social media. So SK, I want to turn this over to you. Can you give us the background on what she's talking about in that
Yeah.
video?
And can you put up the dismissal? I highlighted where the judge even wrote why, because one of those claims on there is a civil rights claim. And this was dismissed. It was filed April 26th or so, and it was dismissed like first week of May. So it wasn't even like, I think it was less than 7 or 10 days. May 2nd.
It was. The dates are actually very, very important. So let's try to be very precise about it, because there was also something else going on in the political world right when this is happening. So let's be specific. April 26th is when it was filed. And then I believe it was May 9th is when it was kicked out.
SK, is this the dismissal you're talking about?
Yes.
That's the dismissal. And yep, May 2nd, 2016, it's dismissed, and it says fails to state a civil rights claim against defendants. And then it gives the codes. And I love that she said Donald Jessica Trump. Ugh.
I did too. I saw that. I heard that.
Yeah.
But
She's trying to avoid the censors.
yeah, so then this was dismissed May 2nd, 2016. And then it was filed again in New York on June 20th, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think I put the screenshot of the docket.
So while
let's
you're
take this
looking
back
for
to
that,
the-
real quick, right? So April 26th, this is filed in California. What was going on in April 26th? Do we know?
There was a primary going on April 26th, wasn't there?
There was actually multiple primary contests
In the
going on
2016 election.
April 26, 2016, the Acela primary, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. And basically, these were the last 5 primary contests that Trump really needed to win to solidify this. And then there was one the following week on May 3rd, Indiana, where all the other challengers immediately suspended their campaigns and dropped out the next day. So they file this. This thing gets filed the day of basically the last 5, sort of the last sort of, attempt to stop President Trump and the momentum he had to get this in the news. And then once, this judge here on May 2nd, it's like, you guys didn't even prove a civil rights violation in this entire thing. So he kicks it out. And then 2 days later, the rest of Trump's primary challengers then drop out of the race.
You know what the best part about this is? So I actually looked into this. I wanted to understand, why was this thing dismissed? And it just shows it shows the fact that the people behind this really didn't have any idea what they were doing. They were just trying to create a talking point for the primary. But this was filed on April 26th. It was filed what's called pro se. So the quote unquote Katie Johnson person filed this without any representation, asking for $100 million in this lawsuit, $100 million. But the problem is, they filed it using a civil rights claim form. So they filed this lawsuit in California using a civil rights claim form, and then spent the entire lawsuit filing doing nothing but claiming sexual assault. So think about it. So they are filing effectively a criminal case. They want a lawsuit, but they used the wrong form. So this was dismissed by the court because they didn't show any actual civil rights violations. So they basically just rushed to get this filed so that it could hit the news, hit the media, and people would start talking about it. So they filed this under the wrong form, claiming a civil rights violation under 42 USC 1985, failed to actually demonstrate any alleged violations of either race or class-based animus. So the court then tried to connect with the filer to figure out if they could get this corrected. And the problem is, the phone number was disconnected. And the address that they used was an address that went to a previously foreclosed and abandoned home. And on top of that, they didn't submit the $400 filing fee that they needed to submit. So it doesn't seem like there was ever really any intention on following through with this, except to get it added into the media stream. And what I want to do, SK, I'm going to have you jump in here and talk for a second while I do this. I'm going to pull up an actual article that was written by Radar Online back in 2016 that highlights how and why this case was kicked out. And throughout the rest of this podcast, I'm going to show everybody, we're going to show the entire world just how deeply this issue was investigated all throughout the 2016 campaign, so that you fully understand why it was ignored and in some cases laughed out of the public square, because it was absolutely absurd on its face that people behind it were clearly lying. They clearly were doing it from a political perspective, and they were just trying to affect the course of an election. That's all they were
It's
doing.
election interference. Sounds like an election interference scheme to me.
The wrap-up smear.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to. So how do we get the media to talk about things that they don't know they need to talk about until, well, you file a case like this, or you leak some information to them, and then you get them to write them, and then look, see the media reported on it. That's what it is. It's a wrap-up smear. It's a narrative warfare.
So here's an article written in 2016, April 28th, 2016, just 2 days after this case was filed. Radar Online. Trump sued by teen sex slave for alleged rape. Donald Blast disgusting suit. And you can scroll down through here and you can read Radar Online's investigation of it. And as Radar was doing an investigation, they decided that it would be a good idea to go investigate the address that the person filing this claim said that they lived. Radar Online has learned that the address she listed on the court documents is a home that is foreclosed in 29 Palms, California. A neighbor, Danny Mira, told RadarOnline.com that no one has lived in that home since its owner, David Stacy, died in October last year. Mira said he and other neighbors have kept a close watch on the home because it was overrun by drug addicts who squatted there while Stacy was hospitalized in the final days of his life. The neighbors, with the help of police, managed to clean up the home several months before Stacy's death. Sharon Rose, a local realtor, told Radar Online the property went into default shortly after Stacy's death and was officially taken over by the bank on April 11th. So 15 days before this case was actually filed in the California court system, that property was taken over by the bank because it was foreclosed on. What's more, the phone number the woman listed on the court documents is not connected. And we're going to find a little bit later that that phone number actually belonged to somebody. And we know who it belonged to. It belonged to a guy named Norm Lubow. And I'll show you that here a little bit later. You're going to hear me talk about this name, Norm Lubow, throughout the course of this. Norm Lubow, just to set the stage, is a former Jerry Springer show producer, somebody who is a known extortionist, and apparently thought that he could profit off of this. And I'm not entirely convinced that he didn't profit off of it. So SK, tell me about what happened with this case, if you can, after it was dismissed, because it was dismissed out of hand. So on May 2nd, I believe it was dismissed because there wasn't any actual civil rights violation mentioned in the civil rights claim form, where they laid out a bunch of lies that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein supposedly did to this person.
Yep. And then they refiled it in New York with an attorney that's a patent attorney out of New Jersey named Meager. The last name's Meager. And they filed it like June 20th, I think. So dismissed like May 2nd, and it was filed again June 20th. And then they were supposed to have their first pretrial hearing. And remember, in this case, in California, no one was ever served. No one ever got any paperwork. So as far as Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein knew, this never even took place. And then it was filed again in June in New York. And again, they were supposed to have their first like pretrial hearing. And it was set for like September 9th, I believe. And they moved the date back Yeah, it was scheduled for September 9th, 2016. Plaintiff, however, has not yet filed affidavits of service confirming that defendants have been served with copies of the summons complaint. So the conference shall be adjourned until October 14th, 2016. That happened on August 25th, so about 2 months later. And September 16th, 2016, notice of voluntary dismissal. She voluntarily dismissed it. But then they amended the complaint and filed like in the same case, they filed an amended complaint. What was it, like August or September
30th.
30th? Yeah. And then they set up this big, huge press conference with Lisa Bloom, because by that time there was another attorney called Goldman. What was his first name?
Jonathan.
I don't remember his first name, but he's also out of New Jersey. And he and Lisa Bloom both joined in on this lawsuit in New York. And they set up this huge press conference, and they were going to have her, which nobody ever met, by the way, come out and identify herself. And it was going to be this big, huge media circus. And they did this immediately before the election, like November 4th. And she didn't show up. And then that same day, the case was voluntarily dismissed again. There were no court appearances. Nobody ever spoke to this person. Even the attorney admitted they never spoke to this person, but yet people point to this deposition and they're like, but this deposition was filed in this court case. Who gave the deposition? Who was giving the deposition? Nobody even knows.
So something else was also going on right around June 20th. I don't know if you guys know that or not. When the second case was refiled in New York, just a few days before that, like, I don't know, June 17th, there were a number of people inside of the GOP that were trying to tell delegates that, hey, we have a conscientious clause that may allow you to be unbound from casting your vote as a delegate for Trump as the nominee for the 2016 election. In fact, there's an article on ballotpedia.com titled Conscientious Clause in the Republican National Convention 2016. And just 3 days before this lawsuit gets filed, Kendall Unruh, a district level delegate from Colorado and a member of the Rules Committee, spearheaded the initiative to amend the rules with a conscience clause. And in an interview on June 17th, so they're already trying to figure out if they can even amend their rules to add this on June 17th. And then, I don't know, magically 3 days later, there's a case that might actually hit the conscience and meet the parameters of the conscience clause so that they can be unbound from President Trump. I just thought that was interesting timing.
I mean, the timing of this is fascinating. So on a date of primary where 5 states are getting ready to hold their primaries, a lawsuit lands in the state of California that is filed by somebody purporting to be Katie Johnson, giving a bogus address, a bogus phone number, using the wrong forms, making the wrong claims, just in time to hit the media cycle right before that primary. And then again, when there's a push to get delegates to basically ignore their bound obligations to file or to vote on behalf of Donald Trump at the convention, there's an effort to try to get them to change their votes. Suddenly this shows up again. Well, let me give you a little bit of the background on how exactly this showed up. So a patent attorney out of the state of New York named Thomas Meagher was reading an online gossip column. It doesn't exist anymore, so I can't try to pull it up for you, but it was like an online gossip website. And on that website, somebody had mentioned that there was a claim filed against Donald Trump in the state of California. And because he was a clear never Trumper, he decided at that point that he was going to reach out and try to figure out if he could help. So this patent attorney who had absolutely no experience working in this space at all was connected with a guy by the name of Al Taylor. Al Taylor. Remember that name because you're going to hear a lot about that name. Was connected with a guy named Al Taylor. Al Taylor and Thomas Meagher talked on the phone, but never actually met. As a matter of fact, when asked if he could meet Katie Johnson, Al Taylor allowed him to talk to somebody via Skype that claimed to be Katie Johnson, but he never actually met her. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pull up, and this seems to be common as we go through this. I'm going to pull up another article, and we're going to go back even further because the story of this actually goes back to 2015, not 2016. This didn't just show up out of nowhere. So I'm going to pull up a story here by a website called Jezebel. Jezebel did some reporting on this June 24th of 2016. And we're going to go through this story because you need to understand exactly why I and many other people have been calling this a hoax really from the very beginning. Because all of these journalists, all of these sources, all of these websites have done this work, but they, for some reason, today's population isn't willing to go back and do the work. They're not willing to go back and review this stuff. So I'm not going to read through the entire article here, but it is important for you to know that just about every major left-wing website and publication looked at this stuff a long time ago. So on August 5th of last year, a Gawker Media employee received an unsolicited voicemail tip from someone identifying themselves as Al Taylor, the PR person for the Erotic Heritage Museum in Las Vegas. So the person who reached out to Gawker was calling themselves the PR person for the Erotic Heritage Museum in Las Vegas. Taylor requested that someone from Gawker return his call because he said, "I've got some good info on Donald Trump for you. It might be very interesting for your site." So in addition to being a public relations person for this Erotic Heritage Museum, this Taylor person also said that he was a former producer for the syndicated tabloid news show Inside Edition, which was later learned that that was not true. It was not true. Is this showing the right screen? I don't think
No,
this
you're
is
still
showing
on.
the right
This is
screen.
still showing the radar online.
Yeah.
Image.
All right, let me load this back up here again. So right away, what we see here is we see somebody out here actually soliciting this story. This isn't just an organic person going in front of a California court and filing a claim. You have somebody who is reaching out to organizations trying to sell this story. And that person is Al Taylor. Al Taylor is the one who's out trying to sell this story, which, by the way, is not the first or the second or the third time that he's ever done something like that. Let me see if I can get this loaded back up here again, and we'll pull it back up. There we go. Can you guys see that? Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So we keep going through here. It says, so a Gawker reporter returned the phone call. Over the next few months, the Gawker reporter and Taylor, along with another tabloid producer named Mike Smith and videographer Jonathan Launer, engaged in a series of telephone and email conversations about Trump. On March 30th of this year, that'd be 2016, in order to continue reporting out Taylor's claims, Gawker Media entered into a non-disclosure agreement barring the company or the reporter who was working on the story from publicly discussing a particular item without the consent of the item's owner, which is, by the way, is very typical. And Gawker was very specific in saying that they never purchased anything, nor did they ever publish any of the stories that it received from Al Taylor. In April, not long after Gawker entered into the NDA, a woman named Katie Johnson sued Trump in federal court in California, claiming that Trump and Epstein solicited sex acts from Johnson and other underage victims. While the women were involuntary, I'm not going to read that because it's pretty gross. It goes on to say Johnson's lawsuit described a litany of acts, including allegations that she was, I'm not going to read that either. If you guys want to, you can go back and read through those articles, and I'll put the links down in the description. The complaint received minimal press attention at the time, and uncharacteristically skeptical Radar Online pointed out that the address Johnson listed on the court documents is a home that's foreclosed. And then it goes on and it talks about, it continues to talk about the complaint Let's see what else I want to, there's something else I want to hear. Oh, okay, here we go. It continues and it says the complaint received minimal press attention at the time. And then it talks about Radar quoted Trump saying that the allegations were not only categorically false, but disgusting at the highest level and clearly framed to solicit media attention. There's absolutely no merit of it, which is the same thing that Trump has been saying the entire time. The suit was dismissed on May 2nd. When the court tried to send a notice to Johnson at her listed address, it was returned with the note, no new address found. So we clearly have an instance here where somebody is actively out trying to sell this story to the media, trying to sell it. SK, Nom, any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Are you gonna tell them about Al Taylor?
Yeah, let's get to Al Taylor here in a minute. So who is Al Taylor? Do you guys know who Al Taylor is?
I do.
Well, I mean,
Same
we
for
studied this, so yeah. Who is he?
Ron X, Jack Briggs.
Say that again.
I said the same person as Ron X and Jack Briggs. Those are more aliases that have been used.
That's weird. He's got a lot of different names, doesn't he?
Yep.
What's his real name?
All right. So we're gonna find out here in just a second. So we're gonna pull up a Guardian article because, by the way, Guardian did a lot of research on this as well, along with Yahoo, and along with Snopes, and along with the Daily Beast, and along with Politico, along with just about every major media outlet, all looked at this. So while I pull this up, we're going to spend some time going through this Guardian article. This is crazy. Oh, by the way, at no point through any of this did anybody ever meet somebody named Katie Johnson. All of the conversations that happened all seem to flow through the same person, Al Taylor. Nobody ever met her. There was a couple instances where somebody said that they talked to her, and man, I got a doozy for you on that too, because one journalist was able to actually talk to somebody called Katie Johnson, and it did not go well. It didn't go well at all, because that journalist walked away from that conversation saying, I don't even think Katie Johnson exists. That's because she doesn't. She's not a real person. Katie Johnson is this guy right here. This guy. Okay, I know, Guardian. You want people to pay you. All right. Norm Lubow, a former producer on the Jerry Springer Show, has previously been involved with disputed allegations that O.J. Simpson bought illegal drugs on the day Simpson's wife was murdered and that Kurt Cobain's widow had the Nirvana frontman killed. Court filings in California and New York against Trump, purportedly on behalf of a woman using the name Katie Johnson, have in recent weeks alleged that the presumptive Republican presidential nominee raped Johnson when she was 13. Trump vehemently denies the allegations. A publicist using the pseudonym Al Taylor is acting as a representative for Johnson and has been shopping around to the media outlets a video of a woman who wears a disguise while recounting allegations against Trump. Taylor said in a phone call last month that he was seeking $1 million for the tape. $1 million. That's what he was asking Jezebel and Radar Online and these tabloids to pay for this tape. And you guys have seen the tape. I'll show it to you here in a little bit. It is a woman who is clearly in disguise. The original tape pixelated her face and her voice, but I think at some point they were able to remove the pixelation. And what's fascinating is the person that is supposedly Katie Johnson in that tape looks nothing like any of the other versions of Katie Johnson that we've seen, because there's multiple different people that have been presented to the public as Katie Johnson. A phone number and an email used by Taylor has also been used by Lubow. Do you remember that phone number that was given on the California lawsuit? Yeah, that's Norm Lubow's phone number. Norm Lubow was the person who filled out the civil complaint form in the state of California. Used a phone number.
And Norm Lubow has a number of aliases, and one of those is Al Taylor, who's pretending to be the publicist for Katie Johnson. Okay.
That's right. That's right.
Yep. And
So
he's done this.
But it gets. Go ahead.
I was just going to say he's done this several times too. He's done this to
Mhm.
other people. He did it to Courtney Love over Kurt Cobain. He did it with Casey Anthony. He was supposedly trying to shop some interview with Casey Anthony for also $1 million, ironically.
Mm-hmm.
So he's an extortionist,
He is
Yep.
an
Also,
extortionist.
hoping he can get celebrities to just pay him so make him go away. Got it.
he's the one that made the claim OJ bought drugs on the day of the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there's supposedly Katie Johnson's real. She's done an interview. Who is Katie Johnson? What do you mean that there's a lot of that the one that showed up in that interview doesn't look like anything that's been put forward as Katie Johnson? What do you mean?
Yeah, let me show you. I found these. So I was doing some digging, trying to understand who is this Katie Johnson person. Well, let me show you this. Here's a video that I found floating around social media that, for whatever reason, people still think this is true. So let me show you this. I'm going to play the whole thing for you, and then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about each one of these people.
Had specifically asked about me because I remind him of his daughter, and she said, well, she's 13 as well. So he knew the first time that he saw me. But he comes over mad because I was crying, and he said that I should be thankful that someone like Donald Trump took my virginity. He basically didn't say took my virginity. He said, I should be glad that someone like Donald Trump popped my cherry and not some pimply little 14-year-old. And I just was like, what if I said, what if I get pregnant? Not even talking to him. I didn't want to talk to him. I was talking to Tiffany. And he said, well, you'll get an abortion then, bitch, and then just walked away.
Why the Jeffrey Epstein case was
Unbelievable. But here's what's fascinating about that is there's other pictures of Katie Johnson floating around the internet. People are trying to convince you that multiple different versions of Katie Johnson exist. So here's just a couple other photos that I found of people claiming to be Katie Johnson. There's this one from the original video. And then there's this one over here on the top right. She doesn't look anything like the one over here on the left. And then there's another one down here in the bottom left corner. I don't know who that person is, but that doesn't look like anything like the other two. But then over here in the bottom right-hand corner, I mean, that person clearly looks like the same person above the photo. But who's that, SK? Who's that lady sitting right next to the purported Katie Johnson?
That's Lisa Bloom. And I would be willing to bet that that's a photoshopped image. And I know that Lisa Bloom has never met the supposed Katie Johnson. She said so herself.
So how is it possible that there's a photo of Lisa Bloom sitting next to Katie Johnson floating around on the internet if Lisa Bloom has said that she's never actually met Katie
I
Johnson?
have no idea.
It's weird, isn't it? Oh, but this
Very.
is the one. This is the one that really, really kind of frosts my bubble. This one, go ahead, Nom, you're getting ready to say something.
I think I know where you're going with this, but the photo up there on the top left does kind of look like the one on the top right over there. Just she's wearing a wig, and the one down in the bottom right. But the claim was that she looked like Trump's daughter when she was 13. And then there's a photo of someone who supposedly looks like Trump, looks like Ivanka. Right.
Oh, you mean this one?
That one.
Yeah.
So the three women, and actually no, those four women, none of them resemble Ivanka at all. So they used this photo here of this little girl who could, does look something like Ivanka, right?
There's a problem here, though.
Yeah, I know.
There's
Do
a
we
problem.
know what year that interview was where she said, he said that I looked like his daughter? Because that's the exact same thing that that Stormy Daniels claimed. She said that Donald Trump told her that she reminded him of his daughter. So I'm wondering what year that took place because that's the same storyline.
Great question. The video that was released with the woman wearing the wig is the exact same video that Norm Lubow was shopping around to Radar Online, Jezebel, and Gawker. Because through the and I'll link I'll put all the URLs so you guys can read through this if you want. Al Taylor was in conversation with all of these tabloids saying, I have a video of somebody claiming a testimony of Katie Johnson claiming that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein sexually assaulted her. That is the video. And that thing started to be floated around in August of 2015. So August 2015 is when that video started to be shopped around.
Yep.
But
that would make sense because that's well after the Stormy Daniels situation. So they just took bits and pieces from other stories and inserted them into this one.
yeah, but Nom, to your point, this photo up here of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl kind of transposed next to Trump and his daughter sitting on his lap. There's a problem with that photo. The problem is that is not Katie Johnson. Here's another version of it. You see this photo all over the place. Everybody is pretending that this little girl is the girl that supposedly was sexually assaulted by Donald Trump. The problem is this little girl is actually a childhood photo of a model named Nadia Jorlin. And you can tell in all of these pictures, they basically photoshopped her dad out of the picture. So somebody thought it would be a good idea to take Nadia Jorlin's childhood photo and pretend that she's Katie Johnson and then spread it all over social media. But I decided to go a little bit further on this one because that's what I like to do. And I figured, well, Nadia Jorlin is a real person, right? I mean, she's a real person. So maybe I can actually find the source of where that photo came from. And wouldn't you know, I did. Because Nadia Jorlin is still a model. And you can go to Nadia Jorlin's Instagram page and you can actually find the original photo. So somebody plucked Nadia Jorlin's childhood photo from her Instagram account and started presenting her as a victim of child sexual assault for the purposes of running a hoax on the American people. Oh, look, there it is right there. That's her, Nadia Jorlin, saying happy Father's Day to her dad. How disgusting are these 2014.
People? Oh, they're gross, dude. There's nothing more gross than these people. They're filthy.
They know there is no low for these people. There is no low.
Okay, so we've kind of already talked about the California case. Now we need to spend a little bit of time talking about the New York case, because from my perspective, the New York case is when the national Hillary campaign operatives decided to get involved here. Because prior to about June-ish, June 20th, this was really just some dude out trying to extort Donald Trump because he's a billionaire and wanted to make some money. And right around June 20th is when the Never Trump, Hate Trump, Hillary campaign people decided that they needed something to run with. So Thomas Meagher picked up the case, filed it in New York, actually filed a criminal or a lawsuit in New York. But it wasn't until a little bit later when Lisa Bloom decided to get involved. So I'm going to pull up, I want you to talk about this for a second. I'm going to pull up an article that talks about the timing of Lisa Bloom getting involved and kind of what happened from there. So go ahead, give us a little bit of background once this gets picked up in the state of New York.
Yeah, so it was filed again in New York, like June 20th. And then, like I said, it was voluntarily dismissed because nobody had been served. They hadn't filed the proper paperwork. It was basically just kind of the same type of situation as in California, except there was an actual attorney involved, although he's a patent attorney. And then after it was dismissed, they refiled it in September, adding defamation onto the case. And that's when Lisa Bloom and Evan Goldman They got involved in it. Bloom was hired for the media outreach by Thomas Meagher. And it just so happens to coincide with the timing of David Brock with American Bridge 21st Century, which is an offshoot of operatives for Clinton. David Brock does a lot of the media narrative control and opposition research. They in their playbook that they wrote during this time, that we referenced in our last episode, they lay it out exactly what their plan is for going after Donald Trump. And part of that, they even went publicly out in September of 2016 and said, we will pay for stories that have not been heard before. And money was given from American 21st Bridge to Lisa Bloom in around that time period. I think the official narrative, I think that the timeline is that in November, after this press conference was set, because that, it was refiled in September, and then November 4th, right before the election, they set this big press conference with Lisa Bloom. This Katie Johnson person was going to reveal herself, and the American people would know who it is that was making these accusations against Trump. It was all hyped up, and then she didn't show up. And the narrative they gave was that she was threatened, and that's why she didn't come forward. But nobody has ever produced any sort of evidence of any threats or anything like that. Also, how would they know who to threaten? This Katie Johnson name is supposedly a pseudonym for the person that was abused, and it was filed as Doe v. Trump. So nobody would even know who it is.
Yeah, that's a great question. Is how do you threaten somebody that is anonymous, that nobody knows? How do you do that? Is it even possible to threaten somebody like that? I mean, I don't think so. But nonetheless, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's not possible to threaten somebody you don't know who they are, but it is possible to, to set up a spectacle like that. I don't know, 2-3 days before, 4 or 5 days before the general election to try to interfere with the election. I mean, trying to use the court system and the media to do it. This is supposed to be a late October surprise because I don't know if you know it or not, but at the end of October, the actual attempted October surprise where I don't remember which outlet it was. One of them was the one that was leaked to and reported that the FBI was investigating the Trump campaign for possible ties to Russia. That got leaked. Yeah, that got leaked late October 2016. Not a lot of people remember that, but it did. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't have any legs. So then let's just set up another spectacle a couple of days later. I mean, this is all about interfering with this election. That's all it was.
And it was the most disgusting interference trick that you could possibly think of, because it pulled in innocent people who did nothing wrong, used photographs of people totally unrelated. Like, this is the type of smear campaigns that we have to deal with in this country, because you have a group of politicians, Hollywood elites, ruling oligarchs that are so desperate to hold on to power that they are willing to say and do anything. So one thing before we wrap up here, this is probably one of my favorite articles about this topic. So throughout this entire Katie Johnson hoax, nobody has ever been able to talk to somebody and report on it. Now, Thomas Meagher says that he had a conversation with her through Skype. There's never been any validation of it. Lisa Bloom says that she never met her. We know that Al Taylor, aka Norm Lubow, is the one who filed the suit in California. We also know that he started shopping this around almost a year prior to that in August and was looking for $100 million as a payout for this. We know that Thomas Meagher was a radical left-wing, never Trumper, willing to lie to make sure that Trump was not elected. But throughout all of this, Thomas Meagher actually was able to set up an opportunity for one journalist to have a conversation with Katie Johnson. So I want to go through this article with you. This is an article in what is now a defunct website called The Revelist. It was written by a woman named Emily Sugarman. I don't know who Emily Sugarman is. I have no idea, but she wrote an absolutely explosive article back in July 13th, 2016, because she wanted to understand, is this true? So and I'm just going to skip through some of this stuff because it just gives a little bit of background. And it talks about Thomas Meagher. It says, Meagher took on this case independently of his law firm and openly admits that he has never tackled this kind of case before. He told me in our first conversation that he discovered the case via the website Gossip Extra. The South Florida tabloid ran an article about Johnson's failed first filing and her fruitless search for legal representation. Moved, Meagher contacted the site to offer his help. Meagher sounded nervous when we first spoke for the first time. He asked for the whole interview to be off the record and still refused to answer some of my questions. Not that I blame him. Trump frequently boasts that he is a litigious man who never settles cases. After hanging up with Meagher that day, I knew 4 things for certain. Trump had a history of assaulting women. Epstein is a known sex offender. A woman was accusing both men of sexually assaulting her as a minor, and hardly any media outlet was covering it. I wrote up my take on these 4 facts and hit publish. 2 weeks later, I got a message from Meagher. As I recall, you had asked to interview my client. He said, would you be interested in coming here to Princeton to interview her via FaceTime? So why wouldn't he set up an interview face-to-face? Why is all of these interviews being set up over FaceTime? Have you noticed that? Because that's the only way anyone was ever given access to this woman. At that point, the Daily Beast and Jezebel had both published articles casting doubt on the case, or at least the men involved in it. The reports claimed that a man named Al Taylor had been acting as the go-between for Johnson and the press. He was allegedly shopping around a video of someone claiming to be Johnson, recounting her allegations on camera. He had also told Jezebel reporter to whatever. Yeah. Because, by the way, Norm Lubow is a bit of a scumbag. In case you haven't figured that out yet. He's a scumbag.
Oh, yeah. We figured that out.
I agreed to do a Skype interview on Friday, July 8th from Meagher's office. That same day, The Guardian ran an article claiming that Al Taylor is actually Norm Lubow, a former producer for The Jerry Springer Show and known purveyor of celebrity scandals. Taylor became more violent when reporters asked him about these claims. Just be warned, we'll sue you if we don't like what you write, Taylor told The Guardian's John Swain. We'll sue your ass, own your ass, and own your newspaper's ass as well, punk. See, he's not a very good guy. He's actually kind of a jerk. I received another email from Meagher while traveling to Princeton to ask Johnson about all of these issues. Sorry, but she has changed her mind and will no longer do it, he wrote, referring to the interview with my client. I finally spoke to Johnson on July 11th, 3 days later. After several days of back and forth with Meagher, I secured a conference call with him and his client. Johnson's voice sounded muffled and far away when she answered. She said she was speaking softly because she didn't want anyone to overhear her. Several times she paused mid-sentence and I could hear her moving something. She has dogs, Meagher explained. We started by discussing how she began working for Epstein. Johnson said she traveled to New York alone to launch a modeling career when she was 13, apparently. Apparently, she went to New York at 13 to start a modeling career. She told me that She told me that one of Epstein's female associates approached her while she waited for a train at New York's Port Authority bus terminal. The woman told her about a party that night where she could meet people to jumpstart her career. And then it goes on and it talks about the events. I'm not gonna read through that because it's disgusting and it's a lie. But I want to get down here to the part where she actually talks about the actual interview that she had with Katie Johnson. Staircase. Oh, here we go. This is interesting. When I asked Johnson to describe the party she attended, she spoke mainly of how awestruck she felt. One of the main things I remember seeing and feeling were just things were way more elegant than I'd ever seen. And then she goes on here and she talks about how she laid the setting of Epstein's home in New York. A large staircase, which matches one Vicky Ward described in Vanity Fair profile, is among the elegant stuff Johnson mentioned in our interview. Johnson also described Epstein as looking put together and underdressed when everyone else was overdressed, which also matches Ward's description of Epstein's uniform By the way, you're going to notice if you actually go out and read the descriptions that were provided in these lawsuits, that almost word for word, the descriptions of the people and the places and the surroundings all seem to come from a Vanity Fair article, an article that was written as kind of an expose on Jeffrey Epstein long ago. So clearly, whoever was writing the allegations in those lawsuits wrote the allegations that they had picked up and read from this Vanity Fair article. Like, they had to make it up, but they went to a Vanity Fair article to get the details.
Wasn't SK there an allegation that a certain civil suit victor against Trump was using a Law and Order episode?
Yep, that is
Okay.
an allegation. But it was funny to me that you said that about her going to New York to start her modeling career, because isn't there another article that says that she left home at like 13 and got on a bus to go to Florida on her own? Like ran away from home, and she was from Oklahoma and got on a bus and went to Florida. So there's more than one story about how it is this all happened.
Yeah, the detail. I mean, this is what happens when you spin lies. And sometimes it's hard to keep the details in order. So you start getting conflicting stories about the things that happened. So I want to jump down a little bit further. And this headline, or this section says, with the allegations against Epstein and Trump covered, I turned my attention to other shadowy figures in the story. Al Taylor. Towards the end of our interview, I asked Johnson whether anyone helped her file her lawsuit. I'm sorry, she responded. Did anyone help you or encourage you in the filing of their first lawsuit? I'm sure it was a very monumental decision. That's when her lawyer jumped in. I definitely don't mind you answering this question, Meager told Johnson, but because of all the hoopla about a peripheral character in this, I certainly don't mind you saying that you got help, but I don't want you to identify who helped you. So Thomas Meager is jumping in and saying, I'm okay with you saying you got help, Katie Johnson, but you can't tell who helped you, which is interesting. When I finally convinced Meager to allow Johnson to speak openly, she admitted that Taylor had been instrumental in filing the lawsuit. See, she admitted it. She said that she had been introduced through a mutual friend who urged her to go to Taylor with the story. The friend believed Taylor had the resources to bring her accusations to light. Taylor, for lack of a better term, a good team player, Johnson told me. If I need help with something, he's there to help me. He knows a lot about the stuff in different fields and just have been really helpful in the entire thing, and I couldn't have done it without him. I wouldn't have done it without him. And then it goes on to talk about this person named Steve Bear. Who's Steve Bear, SK? Do you know who Steve Bear is? Can you give us a little background on Steve Bear?
Yeah, I have it over here somewhere. Do you have it right there in front of you?
Yeah, I mean, Steve Bear is, he used to be a pretty well-known, quote unquote, conservative donor who was a financial supporter and backer of a congressman from Oklahoma named Tom Coburn. Tom Coburn. But if you go back and you look at the records even further, you're going to find out that Steve Bear's daughter and her husband started an organization out of Ohio right before the 2016 election that was focused exclusively on defeating Donald Trump. And actually, one of the things that they were promoting was a sex strike, where all anti-Trump supporters should be withholding sex from their husbands who were going to vote for Donald Trump. Steve Bear is also one of the people that were working hand in hand with Al Taylor. So you have a conservative, quote unquote, GOP donor involved all the way back as early as August of 2015 in helping to shop this story. And as a matter of fact, Jezebel, if you read the Jezebel article, it talks about how Steve Bear was constantly emailing the authors of the Jezebel article, demanding that they print this story. So this wasn't just a Hillary Clinton campaign and Lisa Bloom effort. This was also a Republican never Trumper effort to stop him from winning the primary by a guy named Steve Bear, who supported Tom Coburn for president.
Yeah, but an effort in the state of Ohio would have had the blessing of John Kasich back then in 2016.
Well, of course it would have.
I'm just throwing that
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, of course it would have. I want to get down to the
Yeah.
heart here. Here we go. This is the kind of the pull quote that we have to understand what actually happened here. So remember, Emily Sugarman is the only journalist that ever was given access to somebody claiming to be Katie Johnson. The day my interview, Bear forwarded me a letter Johnson, and it goes on and says, wait, am I in the wrong article here?
No, you're in the right spot.
Where are we at here? Oh, here we go. Okay. It says, I'm an independent person. So this is an article. Let me say it this way. The letter's recipient is none other than Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House of Representatives. So this is a letter that was sent to Paul Ryan. I'm an independent person who wants only one thing, the politically charged letter says. I want to stop the evil, sick pedophile pervert who raped me when I was only 13 from becoming president of this great country of ours. By the way, one of the things that Steve Bear is famous for is massive email lists where he would bombard the recipients of his outrage with ongoing, never-ending email campaigns. He was a letter writer, effectively. That's the way he drove his policy agenda, was through email campaigns. And it sounds like this statement here sounds a lot like the type of emails he was sending people. And then Emily goes on and says, I don't know if I don't know if Johnson wrote that letter. In fact, I don't know if the Katie Johnson I spoke to is the same girl who Trump allegedly raped in 1994, or if that girl even exists. I've never seen Johnson in person or via FaceTime, as I was originally promised, and I have not spoken to her only eyewitness, Tiffany Doe. To my knowledge, no journalist has. Can you believe that? The only person who has ever given any type of access to this person named Katie Johnson, a journalist, had to write in the article that she wrote, I don't know if Johnson wrote that letter. In fact, I don't even know if the Katie Johnson I spoke to is the same girl who Trump allegedly raped in 1994, or if that girl even exists. Even exists. That's because she doesn't.
So what I know, she doesn't. I mean, come on, she doesn't. What's really interesting about this, right, is every single one of those media outlets would have bent over backwards to find a connection so that they could pin this on Trump. I mean, this is not like Fox News, who's trying to, bury this. This is every single media outlet who has done everything they can for the last 10 years to destroy President Trump. So are you telling me that a bunch of 22-year-old blue-haired nose ring, septum ring wearing people are going to get to the bottom of this now, when The Guardian and Politico and all of them have tried as hard as they could to find something? Okay.
That's what we're led to believe. That's what
Yeah,
Blue
okay.
Talk is trying to convince you. They are pulling court documents that are 9 years old and reading them into the public record as though they are new, they are authentic, and they haven't been investigated by Trump-hating media outlets for 9 years.
SK, you mentioned
9
something
years.
that I think kind of got glossed over. Trump was never even served in any of these lawsuits, was he?
Nope. And that's another thing that I think is important for people to understand. And they can go back and watch our previous episode to understand more of it. But the people that are involved in financing this and that outright wrote an entire playbook, raised money and everything to try to get people to come forward accusing Trump of something, or to come forward with some sort of story that's never been told before. And you have money paid by people, not only the American Bridge 21st Century, which is David Brock, and that's also involved with Reid Hoffman. I know you really wanted to touch on Reid Hoffman, PatriotDad, and Susie Tompkins Buell, or however you say her last name. Her maiden name's Russell. She is another one. She gave $500,000 to Lisa Bloom's law firm in 2016, and it was with the explicit purpose after that press conference where Katie Johnson didn't show up. It was given to Lisa Bloom's office with the express purpose of being able to provide housing and protection and anything that was needed to any girls that wanted to come forward. And this woman is described as a close confidant of Hillary Clinton. She's considered one of the most influential Democrat fundraisers. She founded North Face and another clothing brand. She has several different foundations. She has the Susie Tompkins Foundation. She works with at-risk youth, AIDS awareness, women's issues, environmental causes, and that's another one of the Clinton things all align with some of the Clinton Foundation and offshoots of Clinton Foundation organizations. Let's see. She also funds the Southern Poverty Law Center, vote.org, Climate Energy Fund, and the Climate Energy Fund. It's another one that's involved with like Clinton Foundation organization Onward Together. They're all tied. That's the Huma Abedin one. The Onward Together is the one that Huma Abedin has and Minion Moore have worked for and ran. She seed funded the Emerge America in 2002 to train women for political office. And her and her husband are the founding members of the Democracy Alliance. And they host fundraisers for Pelosi. They're from Pelosi's district. And she's been married twice. Her first husband is Douglas Tompkins, and the second one's Mark Buell, or however you say that last name. He's a real estate developer in San Francisco. They're the ones that gave the $500,000 to Bloom's office, and American Bridge 21st Century, I think, gave $200,000. And that's just what we know about. And in our last episode, we put up the playbook where they had a whole meeting. They put together a playbook. It talks about controlling the narrative. It talks about the opposition research, the videos, the stories, the photos, all those things. It's in that playbook.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yep. So it's also worth mentioning, right? Because I think a lot of people forget about this. So, they're trying to do this press conference with all of Trump's accusers are going to show up, and, Katie Johnson doesn't show up, but there's a bunch of money set aside to get them housing and security and protection. Do you guys remember the first debate with Hillary Clinton when Trump actually invited all of Bill Clinton's actual accusers to sit in the front row of the debate?
Mm-hmm.
This was payback. It was an attempt to pay back.
Of course it was. It was. So just as a reminder, I showed you a second ago a screenshot of Lisa Bloom standing next to E. Jean Carroll. And then we also linked that in our last show, E. Jean Carroll getting the funding for her claim against Donald Trump from a guy named Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman is the founder of LinkedIn, is a massive radical left-wing color revolutionist donor who also happens to have been somebody that visited Epstein's Island. So these people are all connected. They're all engaged in election interference. They're all engaged in color revolution. And as soon as it became clear in 2016 that Donald Trump was going to be the nominee and he was going to face Hillary Clinton, that's when you see an extortionist named Norm Lubow take an attempt to try to extort money from a billionaire and turn it into a political hit. Because that's what this was. The Katie Johnson story was a political hit. The timing of it is not at all surprising. The California case it's filed at the exact same time that they're running the last set of primaries that Donald Trump needs to secure the nomination. The New York case gets filed at the exact same time that there's an effort by never Trumpers and radical leftists to try to convince delegates to vote their conscience and give their delegate vote to somebody else. And then as you get close to the election, suddenly Lisa Bloom, who is Hillary Clinton's, one of her best friends, is funded by Reid Hoffman, is getting money from all over the place to literally pay people to make up stories against Donald Trump. And suddenly she inserts herself into this case at the 11th hour. Folks, there never was a Katie Johnson. There is no Katie Johnson. Katie Johnson was always Norm Lubow, aka Al Taylor. Katie Johnson was an attempt by somebody to try to extort Donald Trump, and then they tried to turn it into a political hit piece. Nobody has ever met Katie Johnson. Nobody has ever had an actual conversation with Katie Johnson and walked away from it and said that, yeah, this is a real person. At least nobody with any credibility. Emily Sugarman is the only person that actually had a conversation with someone purporting to be Katie Johnson and walked away from it saying, I don't even think that person's real. It's a hoax. I don't know how else to describe it to you. But the next time you see a radical left-wing blue talker reading the Katie Johnson court records on social media or asking you about Katie Johnson, just tell them Katie Johnson is Norm Lubow. That's it. Katie Johnson is Norm Lubow.
That's the story. That's the hoax.
And as a matter of fact, if you go out to Grok right now and you ask the question, who is Katie Johnson? Grok is going to tell you that Katie Johnson is a person associated with Norm Lubow. And you know why? Because about a month ago, I had a conversation with Grok and I asked who Katie Johnson was. And Grok said it was a court case. And I started asking Grok questions about Norm Lubow and why he wasn't reporting the information that was reported back in 2016. And now, after helping to train AI, AI tells you that Norm Lubow is associated with Katie Johnson. Because it's true. There is no Katie Johnson. Katie Johnson doesn't exist.
And that's what all the reporting even said. Even back then, this has been debunked. This isn't anything new.
It's been debunked. It's been debunked. All right. We are well over the targeted 60 minutes that we like to try to keep to. So
we've never done 60. We've always been an
I
hour
know.
and 10 minutes. All three episodes have been an hour and 10 minutes.
I know. We got to trim that down. So SK, Nom, thank you for kind of working through this, because this is not going to go away. America, you need to know anyone who mentions the name Katie Johnson to you is either one, lying to you on purpose, two, is a freaking moron and doesn't know how to do any research, or three, just doesn't care and thinks that they can score cheap political points, because that is the only angle of this story that makes any sense. Nothing else makes sense. It's all a hoax.
Yep.
Last thoughts?
Oh, I'm just kind of curious to see what they're going to pull out of thin air next. What's up next? What do we got next?
Well, I mean, everything else has collapsed.
I think right now they're pushing really hard with the whole Trump declaring war on Chicago thing. And I looked back to see when my post was on X about this whole blue anon, I call it, conspiracy theory about Trump using the Insurrection Act and martial law, and that it's in Project 2025, guys. It's not. But that's, my post was in April, the beginning of April, I believe. And now they're pushing it even harder. Same with the protest groups. They're pushing the revolution. They're pushing, you have to go out and do what you have to do because Trump's going to declare martial law regardless of how you behave. It was in Project 2025. It's pre-planned. So go out there and, you know, misbehave. So that's where we're at with that.
Unbelievable. All right, y'all. Thanks for joining us. We're going to wrap up with my desperately needing a new version of this outtake.